Thank you for joining us for the second Lunch and Learn of this program year, entitled Enough Already, The Imbalances of 2020 and Impacts on the Future of Working Women. I know this is a topic many of us have reflected upon and perhaps personally struggled with in this historic time in which we are living. I know I am personally really looking forward to today's conversation. My name is Patricia Massey-Hoke, and I'm the Executive Director of the Women's Impact Fund. It's my privilege to work with our members as they develop and lead us through events such as today's. Special thanks to the Lunch and Learn Committee of the Member Education Committee, which is led by Ashley Varnado and Karen Noble, who have worked really hard to put today's event together. Special thanks as well to our community partners whose financial sponsorship supports the operations of Women's Impact Fund. They're listed here on my background. Finally, we are grateful to those members and friends of Women's Impact Fund who choose to make a gift to our annual fund, which funds critical operating needs of our organization. Typically, events such as the one you're attending today would require a ticket purchase. However, we are offering all of our activities without charge during COVID. If you are able, I hope that you might consider visiting womensimpactfund.org/donate to make a contribution to the annual fund at an amount that is meaningful to you. And thank you. Before we start today's program, just a couple of Zoom tips. For the best experience during the first part of today's event, I would recommend using speaker view in Zoom to focus on the panelists as they're speaking. You can toggle to speaker view by clicking the button at the top right-hand side of your Zoom window on a PC. That may be different on a Mac. Switch back to gallery view whenever you'd like. Also know that we'll be using breakout sessions in the middle of the event today, and I hope that you will stay with us as we do and engage in the dialogue. Our program will continue after the breakout sessions, which you definitely won't want to miss. And also know that today's program is being recorded so that we can share it with those who did not attend. With that, I'm going to turn the program over to Amanda Glowacki, today's moderator. Amanda has been a member of Women's Impact Fund since 2018 and recently started her own successful real estate firm. She lives in Davidson with her family. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Patricia. So we are really excited about today's conversation in regards to how COVID is impacting the future of the working woman. We are wearing a ton of hats these days, and there's constant change happening. So when this kind of came out organically in a planning session for this particular Lunch and Learn, and I think that our topic was kind of heading towards COVID-19 and the education of our children. And right before the meeting happened, the day before, the report came out that in September, 865,000 women dropped out of the workforce. And you couldn't help but kind of correlate that to the pressures that working women are under during COVID-19. So we are thrilled to get this topic out there, bring more awareness to it, because some of us as working women are just going in so many directions, we haven't even had an opportunity to stop and realize what is happening with our sisters. So we have two incredible panelists who've joined us today. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Michelle Meggs. She is the Executive Director of the UNC Charlotte Women and Girls Research Alliance. This is an organization that works collaboratively with faculty, students, and the community to provide opportunities for research and education on policies affecting women. And next, I'd like to introduce Ms. Jill Flynn. She is a founding partner at Flynn Holt Leadership, whose goal is to move women leaders forward faster. She specializes in creating and implementing company-specific pipelines for high potential women. So we are so grateful to have both of you here. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay, so we will jump right in, not to waste any more time. Dr. Meggs and Jill, you are here as our subject matter experts, and as you can anticipate, there's a ton of interest in this topic. So I thought it would be best by starting with providing a few baseline statistics as it relates to women in the workforce pre-pandemic before we dive into the ever-changing world of today. Dr. Meggs, can you help us level the field here by providing some data points related to labor participation rates, the predominant jobs held by women, women with high school degrees versus, and then also how women compare to men with college graduate and postgraduate degrees.
Okay, that's a lot, and I will try to cover as much of that as I can. Thank you again for having me. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I want to start out by prefacing that one of the things that this pandemic has highlighted is what I refer to as the third shift that a lot of women participate in terms of caring for household duties, managing children, having to educate children, caring for themselves, caring for elders, and really forcing us to take another look at the division of labor within the household. We're clear that women have shouldered much of the responsibility, but I think that this pandemic has absolutely highlighted the ways in which women have carried a significant portion of how households are managed, right? And so we have to take a look at that. What we have found is that, well, not necessarily what I have found, but in looking at the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Institute for Women's Policy Research, we have found that a lot of women are working in the areas of leisure and hospitality, education and health services, professional and business services, and in government. And in looking at the study that the Institute for Women's Policy Research has found, there has been a negative, there has been a loss of over 2,077 in terms of change of number of payroll jobs for women. So women are losing significantly, and that is just in leisure and hospitality. Because of the COVID, people are not traveling, and so women who work in leisure and hospitality are losing their positions. Also in education and health services, some are leaving their positions because it's not safe. Also in professional services. Also, as we're looking at the loss of household income for women in terms of percentages, and again, this is based on the U.S. Census Bureau household survey, income is down for 44.1% for white women, 54.5% for Black women, 58% for Hispanic women, 44.7% for Asian women, and for those who identify as other, as 50%. So we're recognizing the downward spiral in terms of the economic impact that this pandemic is having on women. And this cuts across whether or not women have a high school diploma all the way through professional degrees and doctoral degrees. While we are clear that attaining higher levels of education may offer some cushion in terms of the impact of the pandemic, this pandemic has proven that that is not necessarily the case. So in terms of leveling the playing field, this pandemic has opened our eyes to the ways in which that race, class, and gender has opened up an intersectional lens in how we view how systems have impacted women's lives and how they're able to care for themselves, their families, their children, and their communities. So I hope that helps kind of offer a kind of high level view of what's happening to women as they're working and trying to make their way through these very difficult circumstances.
Absolutely. That was a great synopsis of kind of what is happening in our space. And I know even as we talked about it as a committee, some of the questions that we had, and Jill, I'd love to get your expertise on this, but some of the things that we talked about was, how does this impact, with so many women dropping out of the workforce, how does this impact all the work that has been done by women who have been in the workforce before us? We always focus on equal pay, but are there potentially other disparities that we're not thinking of outside of pay? Like maybe it's, healthcare benefits or work-life balance programs in the workplace with the exit of women.
Yes, there's lots of disparities, and I'm happy to talk about those. I wanted to clarify a couple of things. First of all, it's a delight to be here and see a lot of familiar faces. It's fun to be with you today. I've been a part of Women's Impact Fund from the beginning, and am thankful to Mary Lou Babb and Claire Tate for that. Also, our firm is actually Flynn Heath Leadership, not Flynn Health. People make that mistake all the time and think that I'm in healthcare. I'm not really in healthcare at all. What we do, and I'm delighted to be paired with Dr. Michelle Meggs, because Dr. Meggs is a researcher, and we depend on research for all the work we do. We work with large corporations throughout the country and consult with them about how to get more women up through the ranks into higher levels in the organizations. So we have coached and trained over 21,000 career women in the last 15 years. And we also consult with the leadership of the organizations where we work. So I am very familiar with disparities and which ones still have a really make a big impact on women's careers. Some of those are obvious, like pay and benefits and things like that. I think the bigger disparities now have to do with things that are unseen. One of them is, and Arrington could probably echo this, a lack of women in revenue producing positions. If you go into business, the kings of business are the ones who produce revenue. That's obviously going to be true. But there are not many women who run P&Ls, profit and loss centers. A lot of the women who have made it, and I was one of those long ago when I had my corporate career, are in areas like HR, marketing, support areas. So that's still a huge barrier, is women in revenue generating positions. Another related reason that's a barrier is the lack of sponsorship for women. And that particularly affects Black and brown women, even more than white women. The way people really get ahead when you get up past up in the middle range and you want to go higher is that somebody takes, as they say, he took me under his wing, and they open doors for you. They advocate for you. They sort of put their reputations on the line for you. And guess what? That does not happen a lot for women. It certainly does happen, but not enough. And it certainly doesn't happen as much for Black and brown women. So those are two things I would mention. Lack of role models is very discouraging if you're in a big corporation, or even just any company. It doesn't have to be a big corporation. If you're the only woman at a certain level, or you're the only woman of color at a certain level, it just wears on you. It doesn't make it a very woman-friendly environment. So those are just some things that are not written down anywhere, but they are huge disparities for women in their careers. I'd like to just mention one other thing as maybe a direction we can go with this. Lean In just did every year they do a Women in the Workplace research project with McKinsey, and this year they did one, and it was focused on COVID. And what they said is that there are three groups. All women are negatively impacted by COVID in the workplace, but three groups in particular have unique challenges, and those are mothers, Black women, and senior level women, which might surprise you. And there are lots of reasons for all the women. It's about burnout in multiple roles and reverting to traditional stereotypes of women and all of that. But for mothers, it's especially hard because of the fear of judgment, because of all the juggling that mothers are having to do every single day. And it's exhausting. Many of them are close to burnout, and they're worried about finances. They're stressed on their marriages. I mean, there are a million things going on. And those of you who are mothers especially with young children who are doing remote learning, you're worried about your family's health. You're worried about your finances. And I was just talking to my daughter who's on this call and worried about how do you see your in-laws for Thanksgiving, I guess, or how do you say, no, I can't see my in-laws for Thanksgiving because they live too far away. It's just, there's just a lot of pressure on mothers. Black women have all of that, Black and brown women, I should say, and they also have had all of the racial unrest that's been going on in the country on top of COVID, and they are much more likely to know someone who's been directly affected by that. That weighs very, very heavily. Black and brown women are promoted more slowly. They are so under-sponsored and under positioned. I mean, they're usually a couple of levels below where they should be. I remember a friend of mine, a distinguished high-level executive here, African-American woman, she said, I have to re-earn my position every day. Every day, I have to re-prove that I belong in this position. And she was an executive VP in a large organization here. So if you take all the things that I just mentioned about mothers and then add those on to Black and brown women, it's a lot. And then finally, just briefly on the senior level women, and I was sort of surprised. I thought, well, now, what is it about senior level women? They're onlys. They're so often the only one. They're in a male-dominated leadership team. They are very reluctant to share any personal challenges that they might be having because they don't want to show their male colleagues, have their male colleagues think they can't make it work. They are always on, expected to be always on. They have caregiver responsibilities just like everybody else. And there are a lot of just little microaggressions that little jokes, little offhand comments, little teasing that can just wear you down, whether you're whatever race you are. If you're an only at the top or near the top, it's hard. So I just wanted to point that out, that those three particular groups are under even extra pressure, evidently.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you kind of broke that down for us, because it leads me to another question. Our membership, there are many of us that are managers and supervisors, and we might have a direct opportunity to empower another woman in this time, especially those that might report to us or could be two layers down. So could you speak briefly on what recommendations you would have for women that are managing other working parents and people that are kind of up against, have employees that are persons of color, where they can just show a little more empathy and awareness?
Yeah, that's really important. And if you're, especially if you're a woman who, whether you have children or not, we do tend to have better skills at connecting with people and creating trust with people. I did read, I've known this to be true, but the most recent statistic is that if you ask the husbands how much of the housekeeping and care and all the necessary stuff that needs to run a family, how much of that they shoulder, 70% of husbands say that they are taking half, it's about half and half with their wives. I should say spouses, I guess, but this is a male-female thing. And of course, the women say that he does about 44%. It's not even near half. He says he does, half, and 70% of women say that he does much less than half.
Wow.
So there's a perception difference. And also there's this thing about, I don't know if you all have this, but I certainly do, is that psychological responsibility. Mm-hmm. Your husband I'll make him a list and he'll do all the 8 things or 4 things or whatever it is, but I have to think it up. I have to figure it out. I have to see how things are going in the household, and we don't even have any children at home anymore, and it's still an issue.
Yeah.
Back to your question, though, I think you were on it. I think the trick here with COVID is to to make conscious what is usually unconscious, to talk about what's going on, and to share your own vulnerability. I think leaders can lead from the position of vulnerability and be very impactful that way. Share your own struggles. Listen, really, really listen. You're not there, you don't have to fix anybody's problems if you can just connect and listen. And this is especially true, again, with Black and brown women that you may have in your circle, whether you manage them or not. I think just listen. I can't tell you how many women of color have commented that nobody has reached out to them when all this has gone on with the racial unrest. That's, really, and it's just connecting with people. It's being a person who's talking to another person. Listen, reflect what you're hearing. Don't just jump in to tell them what you're doing. Just listen, be together with them and let them bond with you as a woman. I will say, as a manager, it's also a good thing to re-look together at this person's priorities and goals for their job, and ask them how are you being impacted? What do we need to change? There's always ways you can make things a little more flexible. What we know is that as women, we need flexibility. That's one of the biggest things that
Right.
work for us. So relook at goals, relook at deadlines. Suggestions.
That is super helpful. And I think now's a great opportunity to go into our live survey. We have 3 questions that we want to do a survey and really just kind of poll our membership, and just know that these answers are going to be anonymous. So no names are going to be linked to them, but we just kind of wanted to see what was going on in our own membership. So the first question here, and you'll see at the top, you're going to text WIF grants to 22333 once to join, and then you'll answer A or B. So the first question is, have you personally made a decision to exit the workforce because of COVID? Yes is A, no is B. Okay. All right, and that looks pretty overwhelming. But
As we go to Amanda, so we
Okay.
can, you'll see, I bet we'll see a little more in the next question,
probably
but just so you know, it'll change as we go, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So that we'll look at those again in a second. So we will go to the next question. Have you thought about making a change in your career or your work due to COVID-19? All right. And then last question, just for the sake of time. Is this a topic that you've noticed in conversation with other working women? Is this becoming more of a talking point when you're messaging other women, chatting with people on Facebook, checking in on friends? Okay. Thank you guys for your input. I wanted to go back to Dr. Meggs. I just had a quick question on how the U.S. employment, how women in the U.S. are, I don't want to say performing, that's not the word I'm looking for, but how are we comparing to other countries like Spain, England, Asia? How are women in America being impacted, looking differently than how women in Europe and some of the other highly populated areas?
I think it depends on the country, and every country is going to look different. It depends on which country is invested on the prospering of women, right? You can tell the health of the country by how they invest in their women and children, right? Which countries are invested in daycare, right? You have countries, like Sweden, who, part of what they're doing is ensuring that the whole family is taken care of, that there is leave available, right? That healthcare is available for everyone, right? So that's how you care for the whole family, right? But then you have other countries that are not as invested, and where you find women or children are absolutely terrorized and brutalized, right? Where they are not a priority, where in fact they are seen as casualties of war in many instances, right? So it's different depending on which country you look at. The United States has a tendency to say that they are committed to women and that they are committed to families, but that's not necessarily so. They're committed to the structures of patriarchy and how women serve in the patriarchy, and whether or not women are committed to the structure of patriarchy, right? But they're not committed to women, right? They're committed to the ways in which women are a part, are a cog, are a wheel within those structures, right? And you also find that in other places. How are women in service to patriarchy and its attendant violence, right? And the ways that it exhibits violence against women and children, and particularly girl children. And so when we begin to look at these charts and where the United States falls, we're usually in the lower bottom, if not towards the bottom, in terms of health of women and children. So again, it depends on which country, which nation, and there are several factors that we have to look at if we're going to do a fair comparison, right? We can't necessarily take the United States and compare it to a country like Tibet, right? That's not a fair comparison. So we would have to compare ourselves equally, perhaps to maybe a country like France or to the United Kingdom, something like that, where we would be more on par. But then again, if we look globally, again, it depends on the country and whether or not women are seen as a priority in terms of their health and their welfare, or if they are simply seen as those who are necessary to be in service to patriarchy.
Okay, that's such incredible perspective and insight. I would love to go back to the results, just as we've had a couple more minutes to text those in. If we can look how the results panned out, and then we'll move to our breakout sessions. So the first question, oh, sorry, there we go. The first question is, and I just lost my view. Hold on one second. There we go. Have you made a decision to exit the workforce because of COVID? 92% no, 6% yes. Dr. Meggs and Jill, is this about what you were thinking for this particular audience?
I'm relieved.
Yes.
I really don't want there to be a huge wave of women leaving the workforce. I think that would be terrible.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's an individual decision for each family. But I think it's good that women are able to stay in the workforce. And I think that for many women, they're able to do that because they're able to work remotely, right? So there's a lot of privilege there that if you're able to work remotely, that you're able to remain in the workforce, but not everyone has that option.
Okay, perfect. Hop to the next question. Have you thought about making a change in your work career due to COVID-19? And it is split down the middle, 50-50.
I can definitely understand that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can too. I want to say more about that a little bit later, but just remind me of, I think that a lot of times as women, we're not good about asking for what we actually want. And we jump to the conclusion that we've got to leave our work. And I've heard story after story about that. And there's a lot of data that say that women don't ask. We're not comfortable asking if it's something for ourselves. And so I really would like to see a change here before somebody jumps. I want them to ask for what they want.
Thank you for empowering us with that thought. We are definitely worth it. So last question, is this a topic of conversation you're noticing with other working women? And it is a overwhelming 89% say yes. So we are spot on with our timing. And what we'd love to do now is we'd love to transition to our breakout groups. So all of you will be placed in a breakout room to discuss the results. And we know that you guys have so much to offer on this topic. And we want to ensure that we create a space for you to share those thoughts. So each room will have a lead that will help kick off the discussion. We're going to be in there for just about 15 minutes. And then when we've wrapped the discussion, we're going to come back and have maybe 1 or 2 rooms share some highlights. And then we'll ask everybody to share highlights in the chat as well. So please feel free to ask questions via the chat function. We're going to have a Q&A session when we come back. That was a nice return back to the main session. So hopefully that was awesome. I'd love to get maybe just 1 or 2 people to share a key highlight of or an aha moment from your breakout session. Let's see, how about Kim?
Yes.
Yes. Would you want to share anything?
Sure. I think that we're all experiencing more pronounced gender division of labor as this is going through, whether it's just happening or whether it's because we might have husbands with a condition where we don't want to have them being with risk. Sometimes I think maybe our husbands are older than we are, and that happens. We also talked about how we think that there are more people out there, maybe it's just our group did not have children at home and working at home, and how we think that if the longer the schools go without having full attendance and safety precautions and everyone be in a vaccine, then more and more women who have school-age children will be pulled out of the workforce. That there's going to be a trend that just gets worse.
That's such a good point. And I think too, that's why, women just really have to come together and link arms, because we're not only dealing with like a gender division, but now we're kind of getting into a mindset division. You have moms that are like, no, the school should be closed. And then you have moms that are like, the schools should totally be open. And we start to, our relationships start to fracture and separate, and we need to be kind of together and supporting one another more than ever. Well, I hope you guys got a lot out of that breakout session, that it was meaningful. Please feel free to share some of your experience in the chat, and we will log that and keep record of it and share when we send out the recording. So we are going to move into a Q&A session with Jill and Dr. Meggs. And so if you have a question, just enter it in the chat. And we will start with one question that we got early on, talking about sponsorship. So really kind of leveraging sponsor relationships in the workforce, and how to cultivate a sponsor relationship. I don't know if Jill or if Dr. Meggs would like to take that one.
I'll start, and Dr. Meggs, you chime in. I think that's a really hard one, because you can't just go up to somebody who's a big wig at your company and say, will you be my sponsor, please? I mean, you can, but what we do is, and what companies do, what we encourage companies that we work with to do is do some assigned sponsorship stuff. Like when we work with a company, we work with a cohort of women and we coach them and train them and do all this stuff. But part of the process is for them to be paired with a sponsor who's a high-level influential leader. And we coach the women on how to manage sponsors, because there's some savviness to it. And then we actually coach the sponsors, but we don't tell them we're coaching them. Most of them are big alpha males who don't think they need any coaching, but we say that we have a check-in with them and we ask them what's going on, and then we can give them a little bit of guidance about how to be a good sponsor. A lot of times the issue with sponsorship is that the men think that we should do it the way they do. And a famous issue is developing new business. Men develop business very differently than women, and yet they'll give women advice about how to do it, and it just doesn't fit. And so then you're in the position of your sponsor just told you to do a couple of things. You're not going to do them because they just are not who you are. And then how do you go back to your sponsor and say, I didn't do what you advised me to do? So it's awkward. I'm not giving you a very good answer. I think one way to do it, we all have mentors. We don't all have sponsors, but sometimes your mentor can really help you get some face time with some key people that could potentially become sponsors. But you really have to earn sponsorship. And you can't do it if you're not, if they don't know who you are and you're not in conversation with them.
Yeah. No, that's great. And Dr. Meggs, I actually have a question for you, if you don't mind me shifting the topic really quickly. But we touched on it earlier on, really kind of using this opportunity to empower our membership to draw awareness to this topic. And I instantly go through the thought of service to others. So do you know, based on your research, specifically to the Charlotte area, if there are some ways that we can help women that are in less fortunate situations that really could use a boost from other women right now?
Absolutely. I think part of the response to a lot of this is about how do we build trust with one another.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge issue. In Charlotte, I've noticed that people work in silos and that people only want to work with people who are like them, who look like them, who work in the same circles as they do, and who are in the same spheres of influence. And I think that is what keeps a lot of the good work getting done. It's also about communication and cultivating good relationships, right? And so people are not listening to what you say, they're watching what you do. So you don't need to make a grand announcement about what you're doing or any kinds of proclamation, right? If you're serious about the work, then do the work, right? And just do it, and not look for always looking to get awards and plaques and certificates and recognition for that kind of work, right? If you are interested in really helping women advance and easing the burden, then do that, right? And not from a way that seems, what's the word I'm looking for? Parental in a way. That's not helpful. But in ways that look more like partnerships, in ways that look like community building, that are helpful, that are resourceful, and saying, here are some things that I know about. This is what has helped me. That I think if we look in terms of working more cooperatively, that's helpful. But then at the same time, it's also about doing the inner work and looking at ourselves and looking at how our own concepts of others may have prevented us from reaching across the aisle, if you will. And what are some of our own prejudices? Because we all have them. What are some of our own biases? Because we all have them, right? And how do we work through that, and how they keep us from helping and adjusting our lenses? This pandemic has showed us that a lot of us have had to reach out to resources and places that we never thought we would have to. And then we recognize the inequities and the inequalities of the system. And so I think that that's part of how we begin to build bridges and help one another and dismantle this idea that women can't get along, that women can't be friends, that women are catty. No, that is not the case. But it does require us to do some of this inner work, right? And not allow ourselves to be in service and in use to systems that are oppressive.
Agree. I'd like to build on that. Thank you for those comments, Dr. Meggs. I think a specific thing that all of us can do right now in this environment is to reach out and become allies. Just decide that you're going to be an ally with the women that you know, women of color that you know, because we all know women of color. And being an ally, just to echo what Dr. Meggs just said, is not to take charge or to have this power dynamic or anything. It's to stand with your sisters and to get to know them, to build trust, to call out and address blind spots. None of us are experts on this. And what I've noticed is, as white women, we don't like to talk about race. We're very self-conscious. We would never say anything to each other about something that one of us did. We all have good intentions. That doesn't mean that the impact that we have on women of color or any particular woman of color is what we want it to be. And we need to help each other get better. It's going to take white women talking about race with white women and black women too, but this cannot be the job of women of color to get this right. That is not going to happen. So we have got to be sisters, and we've got to be allies. We've got to educate ourselves. I still remember many years, decades ago, when the feminist movement was still starting, and I was this little Southern girl who had been raised in a very segregated society and in a very traditional society here in Charlotte. And I was living in New York. I was in my early 20s. And we had this thing called consciousness raising groups. These little groups of 5 or 6 women. And mostly what we did, I ended up getting in a group with several women. It was about 6 of us, 2 black women and 4 of us were white, and different ages and everything. And it changed my life. I'll just tell you, it changed my life. It empowered me. It taught me things I had never thought about or figured out. I still know most of those women to this very day, and I thank them every time I see them. They don't live here, but for helping me broaden my thinking, broaden my abilities, broaden my view of myself. And that's what I mean about being an ally. I think that kind of thing, women are good at this. We like to be together. We like to talk and learn from each other. So take a chance and go down deeper. Have a consciousness raising group that's interracial or just with white women about learning more about race. We need to do it.
And there's a book, the author's name escapes me, but it's called All the Women of White, All the Men Are Black, but Some of Us Are Brave. And that is about the Combahee River Collective, the Combahee River being the river that Harriet Tubman crossed into freedom. And so that book is in response to what you're talking about, the beginnings of the feminist movement and how it did not take into account the struggles of Black and brown women at that time. As the feminist movement was moving towards equality, it did not take into account not only race, but also the issues of class, particularly the women who were in their homes cleaning or raising their children or those kinds of things. So if you're interested in that, it's All of the Women Are White, are Black, but Some of Us Are Brave. And that is a classic foundational text in Black feminist and womanist studies. And again, it is a response to the feminist movement not taking into account the needs of other women.
So it's 1:30, so 2 quick things. If you are able to stay on afterwards, we're going to keep the Zoom up for another 2 to 3 minutes to keep learning from Dr. Meggs and Jill. And but I do want to just officially close. And if you have to hop off, we understand. Thank you so much for investing an hour of your day on a Friday with us. Dr. Meggs and Jill, this has been incredible. Hopefully we can do one of these again soon. I know that everybody are walking away inspired. And just ready to, continue going forward to raise awareness about this, but also just to keep to keep women the forefront of our workforce, and to keep empowering each other and having these hard conversations, because our voice matters and your voice matters, and everyone here has a strong purpose in our community. And call on any of us if you're just ever having a moment and you need that pep talk. We got your back. So we'll go ahead and close out, but thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much to the Lunch and Learn Committee for putting this together, for Catrice for recording, for Patricia for doing all the technology. And we'll stay on for just a few more minutes and ask a couple more questions. So let's see here. I had a good one. Where'd it go? So this can be to Jill or to Dr. Meggs. Have you seen women come together to break down the either whether it's in Charlotte or outside of Charlotte? And what does that look, and what can we begin to do to start to move that needle?
Absolutely, I have. I am part of several communities of women who've had to, of course, shift online because of the pandemic, and they have online platforms. One is Dr. Melva Sampson, who's a professor, Melva Sampson Young, who's a professor at Wake Forest University Divinity School, and she has a platform, Pink Robe Chronicles. Also, Dr. Tamara Lomax, who does a lot of work around gender issues. And these women, when they talk and when they speak and when they present and in their writing, they are talking about the structures that negatively impact women's lives, especially around race and patriarchy and class, and how these things have historically been used to keep women apart, keep women from coalescing around what patriarchy does, right? When women come together, we absolutely shift the axis of the planet, without a doubt, right? If you have any question about it, look at what has happened recently in the elections. If you look at how women have moved the needle historically, whenever we are able to come together and garner our energies and our resource, we are absolutely able to shift the energy and the power in whatever it is we put our minds to, right? And so there's a way in which systems work together to ensure that that doesn't happen, right? And that happens through racism, through sexism, through classism, through ableism, all of these things, right? But if we're able to drill down and look at the things that we do share and stop fighting each other over the things that we don't hold in common, if we stop operating from a mindset of scarcity and recognize that there is enough, there is more than enough for everyone, there's more than enough for all of us to have and not just survive, right? Because thinking in a survival mode is what's killing us, but thinking in a mode of thriving, then we can all make it and we can all be healthy and happy and whole. And I think if we move from that space, I think that we'll all be better off.
Correct. I'll add a funny story, but it's the power of coming together, and it harkens me back to my consciousness raising group. But this is another example. When we were in banking, it was back when it was real traditional and we were still wearing pantyhose and just everything. And we wanted to start wearing pantsuits. Good Lord, I don't even know how long ago this was, but none of us had enough nerve to do it by ourselves. So we huddled together and we all agreed, there were like 12 of us, we were going to all wear our pantsuit the next day, which we did. So there we were, and I was feeling pretty good about it, and I happened to get in the elevator, and there's the CEO in the elevator, and that wasn't typical, and he sort of looked me up and down. He said, and I was actually with Catherine Heath. He turned out to be my business partner later, but he looked us up and down. He said, "Is it casual day?" And we said, "Nope." And that was it. So that broke the barrier. And I know that's a silly one, but what it led to a few years later was we started the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative for the company. We got policies changed. We got domestic partner benefits as part of our benefits package way years ago. And we got other policies changed. We got people promoted. So my point is, it's just what Dr. Meggs said. If you come together and you do build trust and you figure out just something as silly as pantsuits, all really back then, really, you can move a little bit. So if you move the ball and move the ball and move the ball, if we all do that, guess what? The patriarchy gets weaker. It's already weaker today than it was when I was in corporate America.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's, you know, it was just a small action, but it was an act of being brave and banding together.
Yeah.
We all stand together. You know, it's I had a moment. I hear little feet coming, so forgive me. But my 4-year-old daughter just got let loose from one of her rooms. But so I remember this. We were starting a human trafficking campaign. This was years ago, like in 2006, and we had a mall signing people up. And the security guard came over and he said, you know, this is such an important subject. Like, you guys are doing great. I just encourage you, because even a whisper can turn into a roar. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, he was like a little prophet. And then he just rolled away on his Segway. And I was like, where are you going? You know? But that's the thing, like those small acts, they build on each other. And like I have cold chills, but that's just so cool. Like, you know, just like you said, back when we were, you know, women were wearing pantyhose, that's kind of, you know, that's a big threshold in women's history, was when
pantsuit.
Yeah. So, well, awesome. Well, let's see if I've got a couple other questions. I know we're almost 10 minutes over. Let's talk about self-care just really, really quickly. Jill, if you have, you know, any input on certain self-care that would work out.
But I'll do it quick, because that's something I think about a lot. And I'll recommend some things. We're all different. Everybody's different in this. In fact, I love this quote. Somebody told me a few weeks ago, she said, we're all in the same storm, but we're each in a different boat. And I thought that was very, very apropos to this particular situation. What I would recommend, honestly, is reflection. We have a little model that we use that says that you don't learn anything if you don't reflect. What we as women do is we do until we're exhausted. Then we go to bed, we conk out, we get up, we do. If you don't take time to reflect, what is working? What is not working? What is my purpose? What is it? What do I want here? When you reflect, you can learn and you can increase your self-awareness. And as you increase your self-awareness, you can change your belief systems about situations and about yourself. So then you can try and do something different, slightly different, and see how that works, and then reflect back on that. So I would say reflection and self-awareness are key. There's no magic. There's a lot of stuff out there. I'll recommend. There's a lot on positive psychology. Martin Seligman. If you hadn't read any of his stuff, Martin Seligman, Positive Psychology. There's stuff on positive intelligence. You can read that. There's stuff on micro resilience techniques. There's all kinds of techniques, and different ones are good for different people. But that's like the different boats. What I might need is really different than what you might need. But I think we need to reflect and then be very intentional about who we are and what's working and what we want.
That's so good. And we'll close with that last question. But Dr. Meggs, it's just been an honor. Jill, it's been so amazing having your insight and your experience shared. Please let us know what's going on, if you guys are going to be doing any other Zoom calls or speaking or virtual speeches. We'd love to hop on there and support you. Because I think we've all just been poured into. So thank you for investing in us today and sharing your knowledge. So I will turn it back over to Patricia for any last thoughts. And thank you again for being a part of Lunch and Learn today.
Yeah, I think the only thing left to do is thank Amanda for her amazing and wonderful moderation skills. So thank you, Amanda, for your time. And Dr. Meggs and Jill for sharing your time with us and the whole Lunch and Learn committee. So thank you all. I hope to see you at another Women's Impact Fund event soon, and take care of yourselves. Bye. Have a great afternoon.